At the beginning of the 20th century, the Western world was changing at a disorienting pace. Cities were continuing to expand, railways, airplanes, and automobiles connected people everywhere. Telegraphs and telephones allowed for instant communication, economics boomed, and wealthy Western countries aggressively projected their might abroad with newly high-tech militaries. And in the 1914, all of this came to a catastrophic head with the outbreak of the First World War. In the world of fine art, movements like Cubism, Expressionism, and later Futurism and Constructivism responded to these changes by rejecting and deconstructing traditional modes of representation and reconfiguring them into building blocks in color and forms that tried to express the spirit of the modern age. In the 1920s, designers applied this new approach to type design, and the results were typefaces that made really radical breaks from the 400-year evolution of typographic forms so far. The most successful of these typefaces was Futura, designed in 1927 by the German type designer Paul Renner. In the 1920s, the practice we know today as graphic design was in its early infancy. Early practitioners of graphic design, like the Hungarian painter and photographer Moholy Nagy, were constructivists. They advocated for rational, functional approach to design, which aimed to strip away typography of its historical mannerisms and decorative elements, and to use the fundamental properties of form, color, and structure to effectively communicate. This is a page from Painting, Photography, and Film, a book by Moholy Nagy, written and designed in 1923, and the layout demonstrates Moholy Nagy's vision for graphic design. In 1928, another influential German designer, Jan Teschhold, summarized the principles of the constructivist design as it applied to typography in his book, New Typography. Amongst other things, Teschhold advocated the use of sans serif typefaces rather than traditional serif type. He argued that sans serifs were more functional and less decorative than serifs, and were therefore more appropriate for the modern age. Working at the same time as Moholy Nagy and Teschhold, type designer Paul Renner sought to apply the ideas of constructivism to his type design. He deconstructed traditional letter forms into simple geometric shapes, and the result in 1927 was Futura. Futura developed out of a process of experimentation. Renner began with the really radical and strictly geometric forms. But as he developed the typeface, he made compromises with the visual conventions of traditional type. For instance, he pinched curved strokes where they were intersecting vertical strokes. This was in order to avoid creating dark areas of their intersection. Typefaces like Futura use minimal geometric forms and are called geometric sans serifs. These typefaces generally have apparently circular O's, an almost entirely unmodulated stroke, and the letter forms that have been simplified and dispense with many of the traditional features. These are things such as the tail of the T or the hook at the top part of a traditional lowercase a. Because of its minimal, almost childish forms, we today associate Futura with simplicity, transparency, and sometimes a naivete, but also with a particular context form from which it emerged, the early European modernism. This is the Bauhaus school in Dessau, where Moholy Nagy taught and was often seen as the cradle of European modernism.